Hey friends, what's going on? It's Luke from Madman Music and also artist known as Target. Hope you're doing well. I'm here with Open Mic UK again to tell you the difference between editing, mixing and mastering, which are all steps in the post-production of a song being made. These steps usually occur after the song has been recorded and finessed at the studio or with the engineer or the producer that you're working with. And each one is very important in its own right. And hopefully today I'll explain how. So before we get into the post-production of your song, the first thing that has to happen is it has to be recorded and produced. And the reason I'm mentioning your recording first is because this step is incredibly vital to how well the editing, mixing and mastering turns out. You see, if you have a bad recording in the beginning, it's going to be much harder to rectify that later on in the music making process. But if you start with a great recording and you work with a really great engineer and everything sounds good, you're well rehearsed, you know your song, your vision is very, very clear, well, that's going to help make every step that little bit easier. And the common rule of thumb is if you enjoy how the song sounds after you've just recorded it, you're probably going to love it after it's mixed and mastered. Okay, so now that we've cleared that up and out the way with, and you now know that recording is crucial, let's move on to what editing is. This is the part where the recordings that you just did, and hopefully very well, are cleaned up, made to sound better. So this will be things like removing unwanted noise, getting rid of any hum, cleaning up any mouth noise that you might have in the singer. It also involves a process called comping. Comping is the process in which if you have several recordings of one verse, you would choose the best parts from each of those recordings to create one super recording, one super take. You would also look at the timing of different things. So if you have a drum player, you would make sure that they're in time. If you are playing guitar, piano, you would make sure that they're in time also. It's also a great time to get a general balance of the levels. You ideally want your song to be in the ballpark of where you want it to sit so that when you send it to a mixing engineer and it goes into mixing, they have a clear understanding of where you kind of want things to sit. It will also be the time in which the producer will probably organize the project, make sure that all the labels and the track names are correct. Again, this makes it so much easier when sending the project off to the mixing engineer to be mixed. And lastly, it's also the time in which you would pay the most scrutiny to the track. You would both, or whoever's in the room, sit back and listen to it, paying absolute scrutiny to your work, just to make sure that there's nothing that you've missed, make sure that you've not overdone anything. And at this stage, if you find something, well, then you would go in and edit that and maybe make a change. Okay, so that's editing. Then we move on to mixing. Mixing is where the engineer pays attention to the sonic balance. And what they do is they sculpt every individual track so that it all fits together perfectly like a jigsaw. You see, if you were to just release a recording as it was recorded, well, there would be a lot of unnecessary noise, there would be a lot of unnecessary frequencies, and there'd be lots of excessive dynamic ranges between all the different instruments, and it's really not that pleasing to a listener. So it's really important that the mixing engineer at this stage makes sure that they carve out any harsh frequencies, they reduce dynamic ranges so that you've got a more consistent sounding track, and they generally make the sonic soundscape really pleasing to listen to. The two main tools, well, three actually, there are three main tools, but the main two tools that you will use in mixing or that you will see a mixing engineer use are EQ and compression. EQ just stands for equalization, and that means you would take certain frequencies and boost them up or down in volume. And I'll show you an example here. I've got myself a little keyboard track that sounds like this. Pretty nice. What the EQ will do is it will look something like this. This is called a channel EQ, and it's also known as a graph EQ because it's got this graph here. And when I hit play, you will see the curves of the track being shown in the EQ. And what I can do now is I can take any part of these frequencies here. So we start at 20 hertz all the way up to 20 kilohertz. And I can grab any part of that frequency spectrum and boost it in volume or cut it in volume. And it will sound something like this. Let me boost it around here. Now let me cut it. They are extreme examples of EQ, and what you'll find is the mixing engineer will do more subtle, more tactical moves to make sure that the sonic soundscape works well together. Another tool that will be used is compression. And again, this helps to reduce the dynamic range. And compression helps to make the song sound very smooth and consistent in volume. It takes the louder parts and it takes them down, it quietens them down. And obviously, in turn, the quieter parts sound a little bit louder. If you apply too much compression, it can sometimes squeeze the life out of tracks, but it's a really great way to create a really smooth, consistent sound. And I'll show you an example here. Using our same keys track here, I'll just open up a compressor. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the dynamic range. So what that means is these little peaks that are here, they're a little bit louder than these sections here. And you can see that the keyboard is a little bit louder at this section here as opposed to over here. If I wanted to reduce that, I would apply a compressor. And you can see as it plays, the needle is moving down. It's pushing it down by -5 decibels, or maybe up to 6 and 7 in this case. And what that does is it just, as I mentioned, makes a smoother, more consistent sounding take. This is particularly useful on vocals where the dynamic range is very excessive. You can be really quiet when singing, and then you can be really loud. The third thing, which is often overlooked by a lot of people, but professional mixing engineers will use this, is saturation. This is like applying a little bit of distortion, a little bit of analog warmth to a song. And this is just a really great tool to give the sound some extra harmonics, characteristics, and body. And it paves the way for creating a sonically pleasing mix. During the mixing stages, what you'll find is the mix engineer will probably start off with a technical mix. This is where they make sure that technically everything works together, everything fits and sounds good. This just means that there's no frequencies that are clashing with one another, that the dynamic range is pretty consistent, and that it sounds generally pretty good. The next stage after that will then be the creative mix. And the creative mix is where you, the artist or the musician, would step in and start having a little more control. The creative mix will involve things like adding reverbs, delays, phasers, flanges, all these cool, fun effects. And it will be the part where you jump in and say, yes, I want a bit more delay on my vocal. I want a bit more reverb. It's a lot more creative and a lot more fun. It's a lot more experimental. And that will be done after the technical mix. After you've suggested your ideas to the mix engineer, they'll make those changes, send it across to you. And what you would do is take a listen to it, and then you would send across your notes. When the engineer addresses those notes, this is called a mix revision. Now, you will have a few mix revisions with the engineer, and each engineer is different, and each studio is different. Some will give you 2-3 mix revisions, some will give you unlimited. And what it means is they look at your mix revisions and they make those changes to hopefully craft and create the track into something that you are hearing it. At the end of the day, it's your song, and if you have a vision for it, you want it to sound a particular way. The mix revisions help you achieve that with the mix engineer. Once you've exhausted all your revisions, or you're at a place where you are very happy with how the track sounds and there's nothing more to do, and it translates well to some different speakers, such as car speakers, earphones, stuff like that, it then moves on to mastering. Now, mastering is very different to mixing. Mastering, rather than looking at every individual track and sculpting them to fit together, mastering looks at the overall track, the whole singular track here. Mastering is usually referred to as the polish, the cherry on top, the thing that just is that final sheen. It's like in woodwork, you would add a varnish to give the table you're making that final sheen to make it look really pretty. Mastering looks at the overall tonal curve of the song and makes sure that it's well balanced. The reason why you want this well balanced is because it will then translate well onto lots of other speakers. Don't forget, not everyone is listening to a mix through very expensive monitors in a studio. So the mastering engineer makes sure that it sounds good equally on monitors like this, but also on phone speakers, on computers, in cars. They take it over the line so it is absolutely completely ready to be distributed out to the world. Usually mastering is done by somebody who wasn't involved in the production or the mixing. It's usually a third party. You would send it to a mastering studio or a mastering engineer. And this is quite a common practice. A lot of people tend to do it themselves, especially a lot of self-made producers and stuff like that. But Most of the time, mastering goes out to an external party. This is because they are listening to it from an outsider's perspective. They've had no involvement in the creation of the track. So all they're hearing is what the song will be, what it will sound like. They don't know what any of the revisions before the final one sounded like. They don't know what it sounded like at the recording stage. They just have the final song, and it's their job to make that sound as best as it can. Mastering engineers are crucial, and it is a great idea to get somebody else listening in. They will usually have fresh ears and won't be tired of the track. So they have the opportunity to make the song sound a whole lot better and hear things that you perhaps have missed because you're so used to hearing the song. Once the mastering is done mastering, they will bounce it down into the appropriate formats for you. This will be MP3, AIFF, or WAV, whatever you request. These files will be well balanced. They will be louder than the mix that you receive, and they will be at a volume that is acceptable across streaming platforms and radio. Once you receive your files back, then your song is done. It's ready to be distributed out to the world. So you can see there's quite a lot involved in the post-production of music making. It's not simply just writing a song and recording it. There's this whole conveyor belt's worth of stuff that has to take place in order to make it sound as best as it can. The songs that you hear on the radio on the regular, this is what they're going through. This is what they're doing to get the best possible sound. Look, I hope you found this video helpful. My name's been Luke from Madman Music. I've been here with Open Mic UK. And if you found this video helpful in any way at all, please like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.